Two, one. Welcome. This is one of my favorite topics these days. I love it when I can speak to what feels like the right people at the right place at the right time. So not so long ago, I was at the ABA Tech Show and got the feeling that the legal landscape was starting to shift, and not just in terms of technology. Consider ALSPs, alternative legal service providers, access to justice initiatives, a new focus on efficiency, business models, online payments, client focus, and much more. Our old models and approaches are not working so well and are being stressed immensely and will continue to be. So will lawyers. Something has to give. I want to open the door to one opportunity to move to the top of your list and then sketch out a path to get from point A, where you are, to point B, where you want to be in a new and changing legal marketplace. How do you survive and thrive? Let's dig in. So, when I was in college, I worked summers in a copper rod and wire mill for a company called Phelps Dodge in Indiana. And I learned a lot in those summers, but one of the things that impressed me the most was the sense of industry, um, and heavy industry. So you could go walk all the way through all the buildings back to the loading dock and see 600-pound bars of copper being offloaded from boxcars and stacked. Then forklifts would take those bars into a big oven where they rotate until they were red hot. Then they would drop down and run through a series of milling machines that drew them thinner and thinner. And at the end of the process, it was about maybe an inch diameter copper rod. Then it went from the rod mill to the wire mill, and that rod was gradually machined down through guides so that by the time you were walking out the front door, as I did on my way out the building home from work every night, that I could reach the front door and you would see copper wire so fine that you couldn't even see that it was going onto the spools that it did. So you really saw industry happening in a really profound way. But the one thing that I noticed and took with me was that each step of that process, there were new products being created. There were markets for each of those things. So whether it was the rod, whether it was different size wires, different gauge copper, sometimes even the scrap itself. There were markets and there were products each step of the way. And that's influenced my thinking, I now realize, in a number of really significant ways. Um, part is this notion of there's products and there are different markets. Also, at the time, I remember having conversations of saying like, well, this mill is always going to be here because we're always going to have this need for copper wire. And that's one of the things we have certainty about. That can't change. As you probably guessed, 30 or so years ago, that mill closed down, and it's now a local place for a local food market. So things can change. The things that we take for granted, the things that we take are certain, as we tend to do in law, can change dramatically and sometimes in a fairly short time. So products change, services change, business models change. And as I think about the lessons I learned there in terms of products, change, business models, I ask myself, and I ask you, would you start a law firm in the same way now that you would have 10 years ago, 20 years ago? Or would you do something different? Or do you, in your heart of hearts, feel that the new law school graduates are coming out and starting brand new things actually have an advantage over you? Those are some of the things we'll dive into. I want to give you a little bit of my background. So I found this slide from a presentation I did in 1998, believe it or not, where I said, this is what we're seeing from the internet. These changes are likely to come. Uh, those were the days when people were using the phrase information highway. So I said, well, there's non-traditional competition coming. There's this thing called productizing of services, 1998. There's this really interesting company called CyberSettle with this great service to accelerate the settlement of cases that could be settled really quickly. And I'm also seeing that the internet enables, in a different space, this cherry picking, both from the outside, as I was seeing when I was doing estate planning at the time, from other adjacent professions to take out some of the best and most profitable, most creative work from law. And then also the ability to pull out some of the best and most creative people from law firms. Now, if I look back, I say, I didn't do that bad, 22 years later. So definitely we're seeing non-traditional competition in a lot of ways, productization of services. It's the focus of what we'll talk about today. We are seeing these alternative, quick apps, I'll call them, that address certain friction areas in the legal practice. You see a lot in the access to justice area. And you do see this pulling away of some aspects of the traditional practice of law, and also the movement of talent in different ways. So sometime later, about 6 years later, I wrote an article on the productization of legal services, which I said, identifying and implementing new revenue sources based on non-legal business models. So what can we learn from other professions, other industries, in the way of turning services into products that could be applied to legal services? So one of my more popular articles. About the same time, 2014, Tom Mala and I on our podcast did a podcast on turning legal services into products, popular podcast as well. As people started to think, what might it mean to take what we're doing and have always thought of as services and turn them into products. Then I went on and I worked for MasterCard. I covered MasterCard labs, and we had a financial inclusion lab in Kenya. And we looked at ways that we could turn the sort of traditional services into products to help people. So it became a really innovative source of innovation in sort of areas that were really underserved, and it forced you to think in new ways to say, how can you provide services? How can you do those either profitably or in a way that made other sense for your business? And that really, those constraints there actually created some really cool opportunities. So we did simple experiments with learning and finding new applications. It's very analogous, I think, to the access to justice area. And it brought us in contact with other really tremendous sweeping innovations that were happening in Africa. The primary one would be the M-Pesa payment system. So I'm currently the interim director of Michigan State University's Center for Law, Technology, and Innovation. And I spent some time teaching there. And so this has also most recently influenced my thinking about productization and innovation. So in my class, we talk about innovation, creating new business models, technology. What are the business tools that you can use? Design thinking, mapping, process improvement. Tools that are established in other service industries that have not yet found their way to law. And it's been really interesting to see what happens when the students tap into the potential of these things. They become really creative, they become really customer focused, and they come up with sometimes amazing ideas. So what I want to cover today is what is productization, give you some examples, talk about how products can be created from services, talk about the benefits of productization, the vital element of keeping a client-centric focus, how you might get started, and then jump-starting productization. So some ideas for supercharging your existing efforts using design sprints and other techniques that are actually fairly established and routine in other industries. So I'm going to try to be light on buzzwords. I'm not going to focus on tech. I'm not going to be overly technical. I want to get you thinking. I want to get you inspired. I want to get you pointed in the right direction. I want to get you to think about starting to work as soon as this is over. So if I do this right, you will start to see potential products everywhere, and you will see the concept of turning services into products almost everywhere that you look. So let's start. As lawyers like to start, let's start with a definition, although I may cheat you on the actual definition. So we're talking about productization, so not production. So let's jump right in. So this is, you see this as a key strategy in non-legal services businesses, and I'll talk about that. So I have a note here that says you're trying to productize your expertise by creating a product or service based on or embedding that expertise. So a couple things happening here. We're taking a service, and we'll talk about repeatability and some other factors. We're trying to say, how can we base something on that or build the expertise that we have into a product? Some people also talk about it as modifying something, which could be a service or a concept or even an internal tool to make it suitable as a commercial product. So think of this as an additional line of revenue, something separate than what it is that you're selling services, which is time. So let's go back to my copper rod and wire mill. And so when I think about the legal profession, I say it's kind of like what we have here is one element of raw material, and we have one product, and that's our expertise carved up into time, to which we apply a rate, and that's what we sell. So if we say our expertise, our knowledge, our experience, all that we have, our ability to advise people is that 600-pound copper bar. We heat it up, we draw it out to the first stage, and we say, that's time. Time times rate, and that gives us a value. And that's our product, and we go on. And we don't go on and say, oh, we could take this and we could do a different version of it that we could sell. We could do different things. We could shape it. We could draw it out. We could do different things. So we actually would have something, products at each step of the way. And I think that really starts to unlock the doors and unlock your thinking on productization. So Again, there's a number of descriptions, and I think it can be tricky. So as at MasterCard, and everything that we call a product always seemed like a service to me. So sometimes there's a nomenclature issue, a definition issue. So at MasterCard, you might say, well, we have a product that really is where we look at fraud and detecting it. And that becomes a fraud detection product. So you're buying this product or service as a separate thing than the payments processing. Um, Other people might see products come from self-service. So can I do something related to the legal work I do that becomes self-service for a client? Um, I'm looking at things that are commodity as opposed to bespoke, as people like to say in law, and products tend to grow out of the commodity side because we can duplicate the experience, the expertise, we can create volume, we have better ways to price it. Um, the goal, though, is to kind of turn legal expertise into non-time based revenue. So productization can be a funny word. I mean, in a way, we're kind of creating new offerings in a certain sense, almost feels more accurate to me. But the term offeringization is even more complicated and hard to say than productization, as I just illustrated. And so I think productization is where we've landed today. So I want to give you some examples. So this was one of the first places I started to see where you could turn knowledge and expertise into product. So the big four accounting firms for a long time, 33 years in the case of 2018, did all this research on changes to the US tax code, income tax code. And they probably could not duplicate that and sell it at retail price to every single one of their clients. And it didn't make sense, but they had done it. And they hit on this idea that said, what if we turn this into a book and we just sell it at bookstores and then later on Amazon for maybe about $25. And it's just a new revenue stream. We're just taking something we've done, knowledge we've created, what would be called an information product, repurposing that, turning it into a revenue stream that every time somebody buys a book, we get a royalty payment. And so we're in the world where you can actually make money while you sleep. It also creates brand awareness because you would say, hey, I might not be in a position where I need EY to do my taxes, but if I ever am, I remember that their book helped me do my own income taxes when I didn't need them. So maybe they become a candidate if I work at a large corporation or somebody else that would need to use them. I sometimes think of this as reusable and repeatable knowledge. So we're taking knowledge that we have and figure out a different way to reuse it in a way that is valuable to the customer when they receive it in a very repeatable way. And I'll come back to that reusable, repeatable notion. The next one I had very close personal experience. A former law partner of mine realized that in the estate planning area, especially when dealing with charities, there was a way of making charitable donations where you had a life interest and a remainder interest. And that's based on actuarial factors. And in the day, there was a set of books that were probably about, there's 3 or 4 volumes, probably about a foot high. And if you wanted to make the calculation as to what was the gift or estate tax, typically a gift tax, that would apply with a specific charitable donation, then you would go into these books, you would look up the factors by hand, um, and you would write them down, and they would be like, you know, 0.8 digits. And you multiply those together, then you multiply it by the amount of the gift, and you would do, you would get the result. And that could probably take you a couple of, you know, legitimate billable hours. Um, so Larry Katzenstein got this idea that you could actually do a program. Um, and this was in the days well before apps. So this was the mid to late 90s. And he figured out how to program this, put a little interface on it, came up with the name Tiger Tables, and offered it out there. And so basically, all it did was it recreated those volumes of factors, and you would just put them in there, and you would get the actual number you needed to multiply. When he put it to customers, they said, you know, there's like one thing that you could improve, and it would be like just put a calculator in there where you could say, here's the amount I want to donate, and it would do the multiplication for us. You know, which is an epiphany, and one of those great reasons why it always makes sense to talk to your customers. So he did that. I call that repeatable processes, maybe repeatable efficiencies. And it's clearly in the world of apps these days, right? You could see it as an app on a smartphone, you could see it as a website, you go and do that, but it's definitely in the app family now, although in those days there weren't apps. And he's able to sell it for $99 and quite successfully. And at one point the IRS said, you know, we actually like this so much, we're going to use it ourselves instead of using the books. And so that became a marketing thing for Larry, that the IRS actually used his program. And then he hit the point where there was an adjustment that needed to be made to the rates, and basically the entire installed base needed to do an upgrade to get those new factors. So that was a great benefit to him, of course. So that's another thing where I would say that the app world, and you know, you're typically looking, as I said, things that you do on a regular basis that you could make easier by turning it into an app. Third thing, something that was really significant to me in my career, was came from the Edge Group, and they created this training module to help lawyers learn how to develop clients. So it was rainmaking, and I call this reusable or repeatable expertise. So they took the expertise they had about how you do all of those things, and they put it into a course and a whole system to help especially the young lawyers at a firm learn how to create new business, and it was great. So this it falls into this category of reusable or repeatable experience. I sometimes think these days, if you can think of this in terms of decision trees, other things like that. Law firm Brian Cave did had a whole set of these tools called eCave. One of them was TradeZone, where you basically went in, you answered a number of questions, and then it told you like what you would need to do to import into a certain country. And what these did was they tended to, one, create a separate line of income in the case of Edge, but they also made them the choice, same with Brian Cave, when you need to do something more complex, you were likely to go to them. So sort of three different models there. I'll talk, and you can kind of see how they work. So the tax guy, there's really no related services expectation. It's just extra revenue. Tiger Tables, there was revenue from it, but it was definitely related to the actual services. So you would you might use it, but then you would go to Larry to get the charitable planning advice, the documents, those sorts of things. And the Rainmaker training was kind of agnostic. So was not the core of the Edge Group's business. So they might advise a firm on, that was about to be acquired or other things like that. So it's really not related to actual services expectations, just in the sense of brand awareness, but it created this other revenue stream. So a couple of ideas there. So that's how I think of products. Sort of three areas you can think there. Sort of, can I do an information product, the reusable knowledge? Can I do an app, reusable process or efficiency? And then something that is in the nature of a course or decision tree type of tool, which I would call reusable expertise that can be delivered unattended, so somebody can kind of self-serve and use that. So let's look at how we get to products, and sort of 6 things that I would like to address here. So I look for products at a couple of these 6 areas. So one is, am I doing something where I'm writing off a lot of time, or I have a very low profit margin, or I'm actually delivering the service as a loss, but I feel I have to keep doing it? There could be something there where you have candidates for turning things into a product. Second area is where there's a extraordinarily high volume, so or any kind of volume at all. So I think it makes sense to look at products when you have enough volume that it makes sense. So if you do something 3 times a year, it really doesn't make sense to invest into something that can turn into a product. You want something that happens a lot and is useful. I also look at the lower level works, because a lot of people who do products initially think, oh my God, I'm going to give away all this time. I'm not going to have this time anymore. And what they find is they're essentially offloading the low level work to their customers that they really don't want to do anymore. And the customers are coming to them with much higher level work, strategy, those kinds of things. I'm also looking at, is there a lot of repetition? Am I doing something where just tons of repetition that lends itself to a product candidate? Am I doing something that I deliver as a service, but every time clients are complaining about the price, or they want to negotiate discounts, or they want time write-offs? And then the one that often gets ignored, and I can tell you from being on the in-house counsel side, is clients will request things and they would like you to do something that is helpful to them, and sometimes flat out tell you what it is they would like to have. And lawyers who are outside counsel have a really bad habit of not hearing that and not listening to it and then not acting on it. So in Larry's case, like I said, he created his factors. That was all he was looking at. What was the factor? What was the factor you needed? His customers said, I'm not really interested in the factor at all. I'm just interested in, if I give $1 million, what's my deduction? What's the value that gets taxed? So then that information came back to Larry. He was able to act on it and say, oh, I can build just a simple multiplication tool into my software program. And that can work. So all of those things become rich sources for product ideas. So the benefits of productization, I think, are fairly clear. So it's new lines of business, new sources of revenue, make money while you sleep, improve your profitability, diversify your revenue sources, enter new markets, be prepared for big changes in the economy, in the way we do things, in the mix of your firm business, even for departures of people. And you're also creating intellectual property. And as I say, clients really want your help these days. And they also want to know that you listen. So if they say, you know, it'd be great if there were a way that X, then it'd be a lot easier to work with you. It would help me in certain ways. Um, I could use you for the stuff that I can get approval for. You know, I sometimes in private practice had a client who would say, I have to figure out a way for you to justify hiring you. So it has to be a complex issue, but I sometimes need your help earlier. So we figure out a way to train that person um, and help her recognize what that higher level work was, and then to make the case to actually hire me. So not a product, but just a different way of thinking that really helped the client. So the end result is that we get success, great outcomes. We're happy. We like our work better. We get better work. So like I said, with Tiger tables, I could have had the couple of hours doing, you know, calculating the factors, but if I'm able to use this program and show my expertise because I created that program, then I'm getting involved in all the strategic planning around those charitable gifts, and I become known for that. Um, it eliminates there's the commodity work, the work that we don't enjoy, that's high volume, and that gives us less bad work, more good work, less bad work. It opens up opportunities with existing people, and it allows us to create some brand recognition. At the same time, it can, if you choose, be another source of revenue, because you could create a product that you just give away um, to certain clients or for other reasons. So those are the benefits. You can think of even more, but the make money while you sleep is kind of an attractive one. So a couple key learnings, I think. So one is that you want to keep a client-centric focus. Clients have an idea of what they want from you, and or if you listen to what they're asking you, what they're saying, having those conversations, you're going to get to that. And it's really essential to have the customer or the client at the table. I've seen so many cases where lawyers in a firm create a product and they could spend years on it. They never talk to a customer in the whole time. They release it. It does a great job of something that nobody ever wanted to do, that they would have been tipped off to if they would have had a conversation. And so they write it off as a fail. They're wary of doing other innovation. They probably won't do another product for a couple of years. All those sorts of things happen. Where if you have the customer at the table, that's going to work. And so when you use the techniques that exist out there, in the realm of productization, so things like design thinking, these other processes, you want that customer at the table so you can look at them, consider their point of view, get their input, and understand very clearly what the problem they need to be solved, or as I like to say, based on the Clayton Christensen jobs to be done theory, is what is the job that they really want to get done? So what is the problem that they're hiring you to fix, which may be different than what you think. So I think often people, firms, the outside counsel miss opportunities to create products and even to have their clients engaged in them, uh, to agree to buy them in advance, maybe even to fund them because they're not talking with their clients. Um, and so I tend to think that when I hear outside counsel talking about what they thought I would want as in-house counsel. They would say, oh, I'm pretty sure what you need is, what you want is contract lifecycle management. And I think you want to use AI to create NDAs for you. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. What I want is a dashboard where I can look at what the work is that's going on, that gives me the information that I want, that helps me manage you, the outside counsel. I want education that's delivered right when I need it, and is not a sales pitch to me, but is specific, that shares the expertise and your industry knowledge with me. Um, and it shows that you become familiar with what it is that my business does. So I did have a number of situations where I was just shocked to see outside counsel come in, do their standard dog and pony CLE show, and then they would say, here's some ways that we think would apply to MasterCard, and they would reveal immediately they had no idea what our actual business was. That does not help you at all. And I think that if you involve the clients, then you can get involved in kind of what they're looking for in right sourcing, in budgeting, and helping the in-house counsel, especially general counsel, meet his or her own objectives, personal objectives for the year. And these can be really significant. And we have a situation right now where law firms know they need to talk to in-house counsel. They're a little bit afraid to do it. In-house counsel know they need to talk to their outside law firms. They're also afraid to do it. So these conversations are not happening and people are making best guesses. Not a great situation. So however it is, whether you're on the phone, whether you're going out to somebody, whether you're sitting around a conference table, or you're on a video call, whatever it is, you need to have the right people at the table, have the right conversations. So how do we get started? So it is going to be that great interaction of people, process, and technology. It's definitely a team game. And what your clients are looking for, what your customers are going to look for is guidance and a plan or a framework that you show that you can give them, and that your app is going to help them with specific problems that they have. So typically there's some techniques that get used these days. So and they're fairly standard. We're looking at ways to get the ideas out, generating ideas, using the visual methods, the brainstormings, the mind mappings, lots of tools out there that are widely used in other industries. If you get lawyers in a room and you give them a whiteboard and dry erase markers with different colors, and at the same time you give them post-it notes of different colors, they freeze up. So some of these techniques are a little bit tricky to use with lawyers, but lawyers are getting better at that. You are looking at brainstorming, and then I think more important than the brainstorming is selecting the right ideas, and then testing them. So it's a process. So a lot of times you do brainstorming, nothing happens from it. Even with design thinking, you get more detailed ideas, but typically it doesn't go anywhere. It's kind of, how do we get to that next step? How do we take what we've done? How do we test it? How we check our assumptions? Can we run some experiments? Those kinds of things. And those are the sort of underused and underappreciated techniques that I like to advocate. Like, how do I validate this idea? Um, I have a hypothesis about this. It's like, I want to use a scientific method. I have a hypothesis. I want to test it. I want to get the results. I want to look at those results. I want to say, do they confirm what my hypothesis is? Do they prove it out? Or do they mean I have to try something else? all of that information is good. There's a flow, there's a process that really works well, and it actually does in its own sort of a weird way come back to the scientific method we learned in elementary school or junior high school. There's one tool that I really like. It comes from a guy named Alex Osterwalder, and his company Strategizer, STRATEGYZER.com. It's called the Value Proposition Canvas. And what I love about it is it's super simple. It's very difficult to do, and it forces you to address your assumptions. So let me describe how it works. So on the right-hand side, I would look at the customer. I look very carefully at the customer and I say, what are the jobs that they're trying to do? I mean, what are they really trying to do? If I want to renew my my driver's license or my license tag, what is it that I'm actually trying to do? Well, I'm trying to get the tag, of course, but I would say I'm also trying to get it in one trip if I can. And I can be really granular about that. But I need to understand what problem that the customer is really trying to solve from their perspective. This right-hand side forces you to think about the customer jobs. Then I really want to look into two aspects from the customer's point of view. So if this job were done, what are the gains that they would achieve? And then what are the pains that they would avoid? So if I'm talking to general counsel and I understand what his personal objectives are, then I know that if I help him or her achieve those gains or meet that objective, then he's probably going to get it. He or she's going to get a higher bonus. They're going to get good reviews. They're going to feel good that the new car they're hoping to buy is going to come into the picture. And the pains are that they won't have a bad review, they won't have an uncomfortable conversation about not meeting objectives, those sorts of things. So we're really trying to get personal here and understand the buyer and the customer. Then the other side, we're taking a look at the product that we've created. And we say, if our customer uses this product, what are the gains that creates? And what are the pains that it relieves? And we just focus on that side of the value proposition canvas. And then once we have those two things mapped out, then I like to say, let's compare gains to gains. Let's compare pains to pains. And let's see how close we are. Because as I said, the one thing you want to avoid is creating something that does very well, something that your customer doesn't need or want or isn't willing to pay for. So this handy little map can take you a long way. It really, in a surprising way, forces you to express your assumptions and lets you know where you don't have evidence and moves you in the direction to say, what is it I need to find out before I move forward? So very helpful tool. In the world of productization, I think there is a flow of like, why are we doing this? What are we doing and how? There is a tendency in the legal profession to jump immediately to how. I always like to say, can you linger? How long can you linger in the why and the what before you jump to how? So why are we even doing this? And let's keep it in the right sequence. And it takes some time to do this, but the better you understand your customer and your customer needs, that's going to help you determine what that is. And then you'll figure out how to do it. So if the customer really wants, information that's just in time, when something comes up, then they probably don't want a full day seminar. That's where short videos, email newsletters, those things start to make sense. And so you're trying to say, well, if they need this just in time, what is the situation where that would happen? And I would be able to tell that and create the product from that. Um, and then you experiment and you test to try to confirm what you think your how actually is. I also like to say that innovation isn't really a lot of brand new things. Like, can you cook up like really new ideas? No, I think it's sort of like, can we take what we have, figure out what works, combine things in different ways, and that becomes the innovation. So I always recommend a book by Larry Keeley called 10 Types of Innovation, because it talks to say there's sort of 10 types he's identified of innovation. And you can kind of work through these and say, is what I'm thinking of in one of these categories, is what I'm thinking in two of these categories, three of these categories. If I have multiple categories, does it give me a better sense? And it gives me different perspectives and guides to help me think through what it is that I might do. Again, not I think that lawyers and legal innovation are always looking to say, can we do something that's legal specific? What else? What's out there that's legal specific? I think there are a lot of tools out there, and some of them you're going to feel really comfortable with. Like I like the value proposition canvas these days. You might like something else, but there are tools that have been proven and they're used in other industries and have been used for a long time. So I think we're also in this era where you can do experiments, you can do things really quickly that you couldn't do before, and with a fairly small investment. So we have things like Amazon Web Services. We have application programming interfaces or APIs that allow you to connect into things to simply add features to what you're doing. We can do bots. We can use plain language or natural language programming, highly specialized and limited AI. There's a lot of things out there, so we can move fastly. We could actually put together a prototype, put it up on Amazon Web Services, and maybe even have it ready, like a mock-up that somebody could look at in just a couple of days. And then we can start to add these things to what we're doing. So it's pretty straightforward these days to add maps, payments, user interfaces, even distribution channels based on the cloud services that are already out there. So how do we kind of, I just want to go to some of the advanced tools a little bit. So how do you jumpstart? So you say, I'm kind of down the road. We have some product ideas and they're just kind of not going anywhere. So what is it I can do to kind of supercharge those things? And so a couple of things. So one is there is a really accepted practice out there called design sprints. It tends to be a 4 or 5 day event. There's a book on it from the people at Google, at MasterCard Labs. We did it. You see that sometimes in legal as well, but it's a intensive 4 or 5 day, come up with the idea, prototype it, test it, come up with something that you can use to move it forward. So MasterCard Labs, what we did was you came up with your idea to work on, you worked on it, and at the end you had, because typically the result was going to be a mobile app, you had a mock-up of a mobile app that you could show on an actual smartphone. You had a pitch deck talking about your app, and then you had a video showing what it did in action. So those are the takeaways. You did that in 4 or 5 days. And sometimes you had ideas that had been worked on for 6 months or a year that hadn't gone anywhere, that you kind of supercharged in this quick period of time. So that's one thing. You could use a technique like a design sprint is one that gets used, and there are some other things. So I like things like lately, this notion of identifying your zombie projects and killing them. So kind of that audit type of notion, see what's out there, align the right people to the right projects, kind of take that step back. Sometimes you need an outside view on that, obviously. One way to do that that's sort of that I like is non-threatening in a lot of ways, and it gets you a lot of information because people are aware of what's going on in the market. They also have their own set of connections. That's the advisory board approach, where you bring in people, maybe a combination of internal clients, even consultants or outside advisors who are really familiar with the legal tech market is another way to go. And I really like that advisory board approach, because otherwise you kind of get into your own silo, you get inside your own head, and you have this product that you carry forward, and then you have it done, and you first explain it to somebody and they say, isn't this just X? And you're like, I didn't even know somebody had already done this, 5 years ago. So those are the things you would like to avoid. So in all my presentations, I like to end with 3 action steps. So 3 things you can do right away that will move the ball forward. So my 3 are: first, find yourself 15 minutes. You could go longer, but 15 minutes is good. Get a piece of paper, pencil or pen, whichever you have, and just kind of empty your brain of potential product ideas and just try to fill that time and write as much as you can onto the paper. It's all you need to do. Get it out of your head, get it on paper. You can look at it later. Easy, 15 minutes. Then harder to do, but really important, and it's a vital concept, is commit to talking to your client who you think will be most receptive to either your product idea or the idea of products in general, and schedule, calendar that conversation. And I'm going to insist on this. Do your darndest to do that for free. Do not charge them for that. Lots of goodwill can develop from that. Third thing, over the next month, commit and build in a way to hold yourself accountable to learning 3 things about innovation and productization. You can say, I'm going to read a book, I'm going to listen to some podcasts, I'm going to watch a TED Talk, I'm going to just, spend an hour seeing what's out there. 3 things that are going to help me learn. So a month from now, I look back and I say, I can measure that I know more now than I did back then when I took this class, watched this presentation, and got inspired to move forward. So with that, my presentation is at an end. I really wish you all the best. I hope this inspires you. I hope that if it does and you build something, you let me know about it. I want to see that. If there's a way to help you, that's always a possibility. But I see the law students I have at Michigan State doing such cool things. I see law students at other law schools and around the world doing amazing things. And I think this is the wave of the future. And for the innovator in existing law firms, law departments, legal organizations, this is the way to go, and this will re-energize your career and potentially allow you to create a legacy from your career that is personally and professionally satisfying.